I wanted to talk about the design of the N2O orientation system just to give a gauge on the kind of thought that had to go into it and the prediction and then the adaptation that goes into the design afterward. So for the N2O itself, the reaction is a hydrogenation. So we start with our nitrous oxide here, and so we want N2O, then we want the hydrogen to hydrogenate it, and then we want the helium to dilute the rest of the stream. So that means that we need 3 mass flow controllers, which isn't an issue because our control box can accommodate 4 mass flow controllers. But this doesn't account for the pretreatment. And we found that the best gases for the pretreatment were a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen. And now we have a little bit of an issue because our control box can only accommodate 4 mass flow controllers, and we need 5 different gases. So one option is that our nitrogen could be a mix of nitrogen and oxygen, but we don't currently have that kind of cylinder, and we don't have the facilities to mix that kind of or mix those gases ourselves. So the workaround was that we would warm up 4 of the mass flow controllers at a time. They take about 45 minutes to warm up. And I would disconnect the hydrogen and just have these 4 controllers hooked up. So then the nitrogen and the oxygen can then operate through the pretreatment, and then when the pretreatment's over, I can disconnect the oxygen and start warming up the hydrogen controller while only nitrogen and helium are flowing to purge the system. And then after it gets below about 150 degrees Celsius, I'll turn off the nitrogen entirely, and we'll just have helium purge the nitrogen out of the system, which sounded like a decent enough setup for us, and thus far it's been working. So we hit another complication when we wanted to try other gases that weren't hydrogen. Specifically, we wanted to look at N2O and whether or not it could oxidize either methane or propylene. So we need to figure out, do we need 2 more mass flow controllers? And if we do we have to work any more magic with the way that we disconnect the lines? Obviously, the easiest and most expensive way is to just get separate mass flow controllers for every gas and get a couple of control boxes so we could operate them all at once. So to do this a little more efficiently on our budget, we decided to just disconnect the hydrogen entirely because it wasn't needed, and then connect either methane or propylene depending on the tests that we were running. And then, of course, we'd have to go through and recalibrate the mass flow controller. That takes about 15 minutes. It's not a big deal, just to make sure that our actual flow rate is matching up with the digitally displayed flow rate. So the way we were doing it at that point was disconnecting the hydrogen and then putting whatever gas we were analyzing in afterward. But this is getting a little bit cumbersome, and as you can see by the picture, it's just kind of weird. We're having a couple of lines here that are stoppered up. It would be much more efficient if we could put them all into a valve system, and that way we can purge the gases that we're not using and only operate the gases that we are. This way it'll remove some of the effort in having to take lines on and off, and we can switch gases a little more easily. After a couple of drafts, we wound up with this arrangement going into the hydrogen mass flow controller. So this blue cross in the middle, this is a 1/4-inch cross union from Swagelok, and each of these little boxes are where we'd have a 1/4-inch fitting for the 1/4-inch tubing. So these little boxes here, these are 3-way valves, and the reason why we wanted to use a 3-way valve is to enable us to purge the system, to let out the excess pressure that's coming from the main line. This isn't going to let the pressure out that's currently going to the mass flow controller, but this way, if we think we're having issues where this valve isn't sealing all the way, we'd be able to purge the line and be able to tell a lot easier. So you see up here, this is propylene, then we'd have methane coming in from the right side and hydrogen coming in from the left side. So putting this on paper also enabled us to put together a really easy to follow buy list. So we already had the cross unions. I just needed to buy 3 1/4-inch 3-way valves. Wound up buying 4, so we'd have an extra for the lab. But we already had the fittings here, but if we didn't have the correct number of fittings, ferrules, or if I didn't think it'd have enough of the 1/4-inch tubing, we could then easily go and buy some more. This is our end result, and honestly it took a bit more effort than I thought it would, maybe about 4 hours to properly fit the entire system. So this is the hydrogen mass flow controller, and behind it, this is the valve system after it was constructed. I've been working on it the last couple of days. So here is our cross union. Here is the inlet going into the mass flow controller, and then these are our 3 valves. So it was a little bit tricky because in order to open the valves, they can either swing towards the table or swing away from the table. So I needed to orient them all special so that they didn't swing towards the table. That's not something I anticipated having to worry about. And the second was that this is the tubing that's going into the gas distribution system. Those are the lines that are coming from these valves here. So they all come through the bottom. That's everything going this way. And the system was initially piped and measured, not including the valves. So these kinks that you see here are where the tubing was initially bent. So I put it into a vise, and I tried my best to bend it so that it was a level. I couldn't quite get it all the way, and really it wasn't as important. So it looks a little uglier than it probably should, but right now it's functional. So remember, with the 3-way valve, the bottom is always your inlet, and then whichever direction this is pointing, that's where your outlet is going to go. So obviously with the propylene pointed upward, this is going to go to the vent system. I can attach some Tygon tubing and then route it into the ventilation system. And then obviously if this is pointed downward, then this will be going towards the mass flow controller. Now, if I'm running with propylene, then both of these valves are going to be pointed towards the purge direction so that we're only receiving pressure from the propylene itself.